Okay, so in our last lecture, we examined looking design thinking strategies, and now what we're going to do is we are going to talk about how can we start to link strategies together. And in this lecture, we will examine looking, understanding, and making strategies. So, and also in this lecture, I am going to show you student examples. So in this first example, this is actually a student who is currently collecting data for his thesis. And the purpose or the problem that he was examining was how to prevent loss of life in high schools during an active shooter situation. So based on that purpose statement, he included the following stakeholders: high school teachers, high school students, high school counselors, parents who actually had kids who were attending high schools, administrators such as principals and assistant principals, law enforcement. He also included interior designers and architects because he was very interested in what can we do to the built environment during an active shooter situation? School resource officers, and then also gun owners. So then, when he was examining his design thinking strategies, he started off with individual interviews. This, of course, is a looking strategy. And if you're going to do interviews, you must develop the interview questions. And something to always keep in mind is that when you are developing those interview questions, is to make sure they relate back to the purpose of the study. So after he interviewed each stakeholder, he then conducted a design thinking workshop, which all of the stakeholders participated in. And the first design thinking strategy he used was experience diagramming. And so what he did is he asked the stakeholders to select a person who would be in the high school during an active shooter situation. And he asked them to diagram what would this person do during a shooting. And so the stakeholders essentially did this for high school teachers, high school students, also high school counselors, and so on. Once the individuals had finished the experience diagramming, he then had them participate in affinity clustering so they could then cluster the themes. And they could start to look at, are there any common themes that are happening based on the experience diagramming? Those themes were then used for statement starters. So for example, let's suppose one of the themes was hiding. So what we might do then is we might say to our participants, how might we enhance hiding during an active shooter situation? So the participants then were able to generate these statement starters, and then they voted on what they thought was the most important statement starter to bring forward to use for the round robin exercise, which again, as we know, is a making strategy. Once the round robin strategy was completed, the participants were then able to refine the prototyping from the round robin and participate in schematic diagramming. So what I want you to think about as you are linking strategies is, first of all, why am I conducting the design thinking strategy? What is it I hope to find? And how does it relate back to the purpose of my study? And that is really critical. On this next slide, this is again another example of how we might be able to link strategies. This is from a student who actually has finished her thesis, and her purpose or problem was help negation and suicidal thoughts among college students. So she was essentially concerned with the problem that suicide rates among college students have increased. And students who have suicidal thoughts, unfortunately, do not often seek help, which is termed help negation. So her sample or stakeholders were college students who were members of Active Minds, which is a mental awareness club. And then she also had professional mental health counselors who counseled college students participate. So first she had the college students participate in a design thinking workshop, and they conducted a problem tree analysis, and they also worked on affinity clustering. And you can see with the problem tree analysis, help negation is in the center. And then the students brainstormed on the causes. Why is help negation happening? And then what are the effects of help negation? They then clustered those ideas into themes. After the design thinking workshop, the student then conducted individual interviews with the professional mental health counselors. The interviews that she conducted, all of the questions were open-ended. So what she did then is she used affinity clustering to then determine themes that were generated from those open-ended interview questions. And then last, she prototyped a solution to this particular problem. So one thing I want you to notice is that the prototyping in this example was conducted by the student in our program. In the previous example I showed you, the prototyping was actually conducted by the sample or the participants who were a part of the research study. And either one is really acceptable. It depends on the problem or the purpose of the study. Another thing I want you to keep in mind too is that with this topic was a very sensitive issue, and this was not an easy project or research study to get through our human subjects group here at Radford University, which we're going to start talking about really soon. Also, getting stakeholders to participate in this study was again very difficult because of the sensitivity of the topic. So I think these are factors that you really want to take into consideration as you are coming up with ideas for your research study, and also as you're trying to determine who those stakeholders might be. And just in closing, remember that when you are selecting design thinking strategies, when you're looking at who should participate in your study, always go back to that purpose statement. That purpose statement is really important because it dictates so many factors in the research study.